Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to another episode of Connect with the Quran, and we are looking at Surah Ahzab, which we started from last week. And inshallah, today we'll get into a bit more detail of it. But before that, I'd like you to listen to another passage from Surah Ahzab, from Surah ayah number 9, all the way on to 21. So, Bismillah, we'll just listen to a recording and then we'll get going.
يا أيها الذين آمنوا اذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ جاءتكم جنود فأرسلنا عليهم ريحا وجنودا لم تروها وكان الله بما تعملون بصيرا إذ جاءوكم من فوقكم ومن أسفل منكم وإذ زاغت الأبصار وبلغت القلوب الحناجر وتظنون بالله الظنونا هنالك ابتلي المؤمنون وزلزلوا زلزالا شديدا وإذ يقول المنافقون والذين في قلوبهم مرض ما وعدنا الله ورسوله إلا غرورا وإذ قالت طائفة منهم يا أهل يثرب لا مقام لكم فارجعوا ويستأذن فريق منهم النبي يقولون إن بيوتنا عورة وما هي بعورة إن يريدون إلا فرارا ولو دخلت عليهم من أقطارها ثم سئلوا الفتنة لآتوها وما تلبثوا بها إلا يسيرا ولقد كانوا عاهدوا الله من قبل لا يولون الأدبار وكان عهد الله مسؤولا قل لن ينفعكم الفرار إن فررتم من الموت أو القتل وإذا لا تمتعون إلا قليلا قل من ذا الذي يعصمكم من الله إن أراد بكم سوءا أو أراد بكم رحمة ولا يجدون لهم من دون الله وليا ولا نصيرا قد يعلم الله المعوقين منكم والقائلين لإخوانهم هلم إلينا ولا يأتون البأس إلا قليلا أشحة عليكم فإذا جاء الخوف رأيتهم ينظرون إليك تدور أعينهم كالذي يغشى عليه من الموت فإذا ذهب الخوف سلقوكم بألسنة حداد أشحة على الخير أولئك لم يؤمنوا فأحبط الله أعمالهم وكان ذلك على الله يسيرا يحسبون الأحزاب لم يذهبوا وإن يأتي الأحزاب يودوا لو أنهم بادون في الأعراب يسألون عن أنبائكم ولو كانوا فيكم ما قاتلوا إلا قليلا لقد كان لكم في رسول الله أسوة حسنة لمن كان يرجو الله واليوم الآخر وذكر الله كثيرا.
So, Bismillah, here the believers are reminded of the grace of Allah and how these hosts crowded them from all around, but Allah sent against them a hurricane and a force which you didn't see, but Allah saw, and all that you do. So they came from you from all sides, and they really gave you grief, and and the situation is that they were given a tremendous shaking. This is in 11. And the hypocrites in whose hearts are disease, this is what they did. They kept undermining. They said, Allah and His Messenger promised us nothing but delusion. And the party of them was saying that you can't withstand the attack, so go back. And the band of them asked for leave from the Rasul that truly our houses are exposed, so let us go out. They're not exposed. This is about the hypocrites, but they intended nothing but to run away. And they would have incited sedition. This is in 14. And they really didn't want to have and yet they had already covenanted with Allah not to turn their backs. This is also referring to the Banu Qurayza. But running away will not stop death from coming to you if it's decreed for you. So, and in ayah number 19, it's covetousness, ashihatun alaykum, overcame you when fear. So, ayah 19 is giving you that when they're fearful, it's like anything, it's a blame game, basically. When something goes wrong, you want to blame them, you want to do this and that. And so they said, you will see their eyes rolling over, revolving like those about hovering death, and that you've put them in trouble, and such men have no faith, and their deeds will be turned to nothing. So this is about being super nasty, bad-mouthing Rasulullah, and on in 19. Then they think, they're told that the Confederates have moved back, but they still are scared, and they are really frightened to bits in 20. So this is what it is. And in 21, I love where we finish off, is that لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رُسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ لمن كان يرجو الله واليوم الآخر وذكر الله كثيرا. It's a beautiful one which says, we have indeed made in the Messenger of Allah a beautiful pattern for anybody who hopes to reach Allah and the final day, and who engages much in the praise of Allah. That is so strategically placed, that ayah, where Rasulullah is just being hounded, bad-mouthed by the Quraysh, by the hypocrites, and Allah is telling the believers, but He is your best example. So, the link you can make with the genocide going on in Palestine, and we say, when is the help of Allah going to come? Or when is that? But you never should lose that the Uswatul Hasana, the best example, is our Rasul. So for us, mixing falsehood or doing false propaganda to get brownie points or to get a media relevant something, that's not on. It's like you really have to stick to it. So what did the believers say in 22? When the believers saw the Confederate forces, all these around us, they said, but this is exactly what we were promised, that we're going to be tested in trial, like it said in Surah Ankabut, that don't think you're going to believe. This is what Allah has promised us, and it's only true. So it only added their faith, their zeal. They tightened up their belts, and they were willing to face the Confederates. Now, a bit of background of how these Confederates came about. So the Quraysh convinced them, and this is all at the instigation of one of the Jewish tribes that was expelled, who went to them. He said, look, they still had this axe to grind, even though they were allowed to take their things out of when they were expelled, with kindness. So when the Muslims also knew they are coming, Salman al-Farsi, one of the Sahabi, who was from Faris, from Persia, he said, what we do when we fear an attack from our city is that we dig a trench. We dig a trench all around. So geographically, I can't explain it to you, but whether it's between the two safe places, the two mountains or two whatever that was defending, I mean, which were like supports or a fortress around Medina, the place that was open, that's where they dug a trench. It was a huge a trench, wide and deep, that they had to dig to prevent the armies from coming. And it did stop them. They were shocked. What's this? So they said this was a new war strategy that Salman al Farsi helped the Muslims do, and it did win. There was one guy, a bad guy, I can't remember his name, something Wad, who actually, even though he was so old, he did manage with his horse to come all the way with all the Muslims on this side, and he's on their side of the trench. So they're saying, well, you're on our side, don't you want to become Muslim, and so on, or other things. Then, but he did. Then Hazrat Ali then killed him off. But he was like mocking and making fun. No, nobody can get the better of me, this and that. And at the invitation of Islam, he didn't, so he was killed. Okay, so this is going on for days and days, and in the meantime, this is also amazing. There was this the guy of the Bani Nadir, who came to the Banu Qurayza, who were within Medina as an individual person. There was coming and going. So when he came to the Banu Qurayza. He said, "Look, we're nearly about to win. So now all you have to do is you'll have to open the door at the back or something and let us in, and then we'll be able to attack them from both sides. But you really need to renege on your treaty with Rasulullah." And the Qurayza knew what the consequence of reneging on the treaty would be if the Muslims are not all finished off. So they, in fact, it like, look at the irony in the history in the Surah. It goes that this guy, when he was knocking at the door of Banu Qurayza, the Banu Qurayza chief did not want to open it. He did not want to engage with the Banu Nadir guy. He said, "No, just go away. You are bad news." He said, "No, no, no, no. I've only come wish you well," and this and that. And of course, he managed to convince them that they are going to renege. The Muslims heard of it, so now they're standing at the trench. They're trying to defend the trench, and some of them having to go to see what's going on at the back. The women, which are exposed somewhere else, somebody else to be there. So, and it's really, really getting hard, food-wise, otherwise. Just then there is this Nuaym ibn Masud. He was from the Ghatafan tribes, one of the allied tribes with the Quraysh. And many of these tribes, they couldn't give two hoots about the Quraysh or anybody. It's just that they got conned in with the Quraysh to say, no, this is something which impacts all of us, so we really need to get rid of them. So he was from that tribe, and he became Muslim. And he became Muslim in this time when this is going on. And he individually also came to Rasulullah, and he said the Shahada, and he said, "I've become Muslim, but nobody knows I'm Muslim. So how can I be of service to you?" So it's just so beautiful. So Rasulullah said, well, you can help find out and sow seeds of discord between the tribes and the Quraysh which are outside there, or all the Quraysh, and what we know they've done to Qurayza, of trying to put the Quraysh on their side. So he said, try and put a bone of contention, try to create some mistrust between these two. So, he was, as a Ghatafan or whatever his tribe was, he had access to the Qurayza. So he went to them. He said, "Oh, I hear, they are telling you to support them, and you would." So he said, "Listen, they're going to come and go, but if after the siege they'll be exhausted, but you'll be left behind to face Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam if this doesn't work. So, just to safeguard yourself, you ask the Quraysh." When they want to come to you that, listen, yes, we will do it, but you must leave 10 of your leaders or of your big guys, you must leave 10 people ransom with us, so we know that you're not going to go away leaving us exposed. So supposedly, draw this parallel, look at it, what happened in Gaza and all the rest about the, hostages taken. And they were thinking they were going to defend them and help them and support them. Instead, they've left them go also. So that's just, by the way, at an individual lesson of a take home from how you can relate it today. And then they went to the Quraysh, and this is Naim ibn Masud, and he said, look, I think the Quraysh are having cold feet about you guys being they just want to back out and they do want to hold on to the treaty with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He didn't say sallallahu obviously to them, but basically to say that they're going to ask you to ransom some people with them so they can be sure that you don't disappear. But he said it like they are asking for you to give 10 people because they are now backtracking and they're not being trusting. So in this way, he created between them a rift, and that's where thereafter then Allah said that we sent against them a hurricane and forces. So because everybody was nearly at the end of their tether at that time. And so the winds happened, the tents were blown away, everything happened, and they had to leave. There was other stories within this story of other strategic wartime events happening, but this is what happened. So the Confederates, that was all lost and gone in the hurricane and the forces, and the Muslims could take a breathing step, and then they had to deal with the Banu Qurayza thereafter. That's another story, but it's so interesting. It would be really lovely if you go and read it. So that's just the one bit about the ongoing battle of Khandaq, or the battle of the trench, or the Ahzab, the people of the Ahzab. So that's that first bit. Inshallah, we'll come back after a break and get into the other story. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So we just very briefly talked about how the Battle of the Confederates took place and what was the background on it. What I have given you about Nuaym ibn Masud and all this is not in the Quran. All the Quran tells us first off that he sent the hurricane and the winds, and that's how we got rid of the Confederates. So that's there. Now I'm just going to go on to from ayah number 28 of when the Rasul is told to address his Ya Yuhan Nabiyyu Qul li azwajika. Tell your consorts that if this life is what you desire, this is because of the instigation of other people. Why can you live if you're the leaders' wives? Why you not in lavish luxury? So the life, if you do desire the life of this world and the glitter, then come, I'll provide you for your enjoyment and set you free with a handsome manner. But if you seek Allah and the Rasul and the home of the hereafter, then Allah has prepared for the well-doers amongst you a great reward. And so 30 goes on to say, but if you are going to be in lewdness or guilty or something, then that's it's easy for Allah to double your punishment also. But then if you devote your services for Allah and the Rasul, your reward will be twice, and so on. And then so it goes on. 33 tells them, stay quietly in your homes, okay, and make not a dazzling display like the former times. And in 34, and recite what is rehearsed to you in your homes with the signs of Allah. Then the beautiful ayah 35, and a bit of background on this is that when this ayah came, it was that somebody asked, it's always Hoa in the Quran, it's always about men, and so on. So what is it that we, where do we surface or appear in this whole story of whatever's happening about they get more in the wartime, the men and this and that. So this beautiful passage comes down, and this is where this surah is over two juz. It's in surah 21 and 22. So in 22, in ayah 35, a few ayahs, the juz starts in about ayah 31. So in ayat 35, it's a beautiful passage which goes, Innal Muslimina wal Muslimat wal Mu'minina wal Mu'minat wal Qanitina wal Qanitat wal Sadiqina wal Sadiqat wal Sabirina wal Sabirat wal Khashiina wal Khashiat wal Mutasaddiqina wal Mutasaddiqat wal Sa'imina wal Sa'imat wal Hafidina furujuhum والحافظات والذاكرين الله كثيرا والذاكرات أعد الله لهم مغفرة وأجرا عظيما. And so Allah sent this surah, this ayah down, which is for Muslim men and women, for Muslim believing men and believing women, and devout men and devout women, and true men and true women, and women and men who are patient, and women who are patient and constant, and men who humble themselves and women who humble themselves, for men and women who give in charity, for men and women who fast, and for men and women who guard their chastity, and for men and women who engage in zakirat, in much of Allah's praise. For them Allah has prepared forgiveness and a great reward. So this is a beautiful one when we feel that, we're being told you're second class citizens, females, you don't do something. This is a beautiful ayah really to memorize, in which we are told, no, on these things we are at par, we are the same. And they say the best of you is the one of best of taqwa. So yes, just because of the default position is that we talk about men, the Hoa term, but the beautiful of Nas, of all these terms which ostensibly refer to the male, when it's just an overarching mankind, it says mankind, but of course womankind is incorporated in so many things. So most things are for both, but in this, Allah, because there was a question raised about it, Allah chose to answer it. So it's a beautiful passage to give a lot of solace for all those with our tendencies to be a bit feministic, and the Quran doesn't talk about us or this or that. So just look at this ayah, and if you look at the tafsir of it, it's all just very beautiful on how those we are at par, be it our fasting, be it our charity, giving us something. And it is not fitting for a believer, man or woman, when a matter has been decided by Allah and His Messenger, to have another option about their decision. If anybody disobeys, he's clearly on the wrong path. So this is one thing. So, and then it goes on to talk about briefly about the wedding of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Zainab radiallahu anha, and she's an mu'min. So it says in 50, Ya ayyuhan nabiyyu, we have made lawful for you your wives to whom you have paid their dowers. Okay, and if the Prophet wishes to marry her, Zainab radiallahu anha, only for you, but not for the white believers, the more numbers, and what happens is that he then did, but they, this is where with Zayd they were worried about how can he marry his son's wife, a divorced wife. And so yes, so it's a fear Allah. And when Zayd dissolved his marriage with her with the necessary formality of iddah, we joined her in marriage to you. This is in ayah 37. And in order that in future there may be no difficulty for the believers about marriage to the wives of their adopted sons when the latter have dissolved. So this was the precedent he put in place, which which the hypocrites used to make, how can you change the system of the society? And any change of that kind, when we want to come back to to basics, but everybody has fancy weddings, how can you have just a simple wedding? So things like that. Anyway, so there can be no difficulty to the Prophet of what Allah has indicated to him as a duty. Then it goes on. So, and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not a father to any of you, but he's a messenger and the Khatamun Nabiyyin. Wa kana Allahu bi kulli shay'in alima. And Allah, this is in ayah 40. And then it says, a beautiful passage from 41 to 45 and so on about Allah, that it's a lamp, it's spreading a lamp, whoever invites to Allah. And then a bit on the fiqh of iddah and dowries and who you can marry and who you can't. And then the beautiful thing is, in 53 again, now directives given to the believers how to behave with Rasulullah. Oh, you believe, do not enter the Prophet's homes until leave is given. So knock on the door before you go. Don't just walk in. And if you are invited for a meal, like they were invited for the walima of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam with Zainab, and they were there. If you're invited for a meal, don't go so early as to wait for its preparations, but when you are invited, enter, and when you have had your meal, disperse without seeking familiar talk. That's also for us. You know how you invite somebody for iftar or something, and now they're just on and on, whether there is Taraweeh to say or something, they just park there. And so here is such a thing. Such behavior annoys the Prophet, and he is too, with too much hair, he is ashamed to dismiss you, but Allah is not ashamed to tell you, take a hike. So here is very, and when you ask his wives for anything you want from them, do it behind the screen. It's purer for your heart and their hearts, and nor is it right for you that you should annoy Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that or that you should marry his widows after him at any time. For such is an enormity in the Allah azima. It's a great dhalika kana in the Allah azima. This would be a great enormity. So what you know and what is you conceal, Allah knows. But this was basically um, uh, clear-cut instructions about that, about the around Zayd radiallahu anhu and Zainab bint Jahsh, their wedding and their divorce. And I love it, the fact that Zayd ibn Haritha is it's only here, and the only time when a Sahabi is mentioned by name. And then it goes on to say that those who annoy believing men and women undeservedly, they are getting on themselves a glaring sin. And those who annoy, in 57, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah has cursed them in this world and in the hereafter, and they've got a punishment. So all what they do, for me, now my take home from there is, when they insult Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, cartoons, books, anything. No, be comforted in your heart. Whatever they try to do, Allah has cursed them, and it will bear no blessings on them. So, oh, you who believe, don't be like the people who vexed and insulted Musa, and he cleared them from everything. But the example of Musa alayhi salam is because his people gave him a lot of Ya Musa, Ya Musa. The way they would call out, the whole thing was horrific. So that, in a nutshell, about the story of Rasulullah, of his domestic thing, of what is important is that the fact that um, Zayd ibn Harith was so dear to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but the wedding didn't work, so it's okay. It is a bad thing to be divorced, but it happened. And Zainab radiallahu anhu and their family, who didn't want that wedding in the first place, and it was only at the insistence of Rasulullah who accepted it, they would have been grieved, and they were. But how Allah, out of that grief of Zainab radiallahu not being happy there, what she got by following Rasulullah's directive and getting married to Zayd, even though she didn't want to, and then the whole time it wasn't comfortable, but she listened to Rasulullah. So thereafter, what does she get? She gets to be a Mu'mineen. And so there were two Zainabs as wives of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So even in this surah, it's also clear, when people ask, oh, well, if 4 wives the limit, how come he had more than that? But here it exonerates him. This is especially only for you. And the beauty, if you want to take from having had these wives, how many different variety of wives they were: Aisha radiallahu anha, Hafsa radiallahu anha, Salama, just with their different personalities. For women, how much more access do we have directly to Rasulullah through the wives? So I think that's just another beautiful way of looking at it and reading up on the wives, on their special traits, where there was education of Hafsa radiallahu anha. She was the keeper of the Quran after Rasulullah's demise, of the collection of that came together, of Aisha radiallahu anha, of how much intimate information she was able to pass on for our own biological conditions and so on. and all of them in different ways how precious they were, and the two Zainabs of how generous they were, and so on. So so I would like the take home to be from Surah Ahzab is it does talk about the Battle of the Confederates. It gives you a background of the hypocrites, the connivance, the designing. So what you think is happening today in Gaza and all the connivance and whatever else goes on between the powers, the Confederates, all these people, it will inshallah be all up in smoke. The time is for Allah to know, not for us, but we need to have that firm yaqeen. And also from domestic issues, if we think we have our little problems with mother-in-law, daughter-in-law, this one or that one, or our daughter suffering somewhere, rest assured there have been big problems elsewhere as well. And just by reading those stories, it should be able to give us some solace. So I hope with that, I conclude this series of group 4 of surahs, and this was the Madani Surah, Surah Ahzab, and with that we end off, and I pray it's been beneficial for you to be listening, and Allah make it work for me, that it helps me gain my place in Jannah, inshallah, with these small efforts. So, Subhana Rabbika Rabbil Izzati Amma Yasifun, wa Salamun al Mursaleen, walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
La 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 la.